Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode at a time. Now we're trudging through the final episodes of this season. And after this one, actually after the next episode, every episode is going to be connected to the main plot, if I'm reading this right. But indirectly, the rest of the season episodes all revolve around marriage as a subplot or as the main plot one way or another. And this episode, it's Who's Next? It's about replacement spouses, which when you're married, that might come into your mind on occasion, but I don't mean replacement spouses as in you divorce. I'm talking about replacement spouses in case one of you bites the big one, which once you start to get up there in age and you've been married for a while is probably more of a thought, but when you're younger it might also be one that crosses your mind. But as you see in this episode, if you do think about it, you gotta be careful not to let any type of jealousy seep into that, because that could ruin stuff. Now this one is written by Steve Scroven and Marian Trogan, who wrote this one and The Plan, and that seems to be the only stuff she wrote of note with it. She did some other writing for other sitcoms, so she's prolific with that. And this episode is noteworthy because it's the one and only appearance of the much talked about and long built up Harriet Lickman, Marie's bridge partner and the focus of a lot of Frank's teasing lust jokes. And in here she's played by Renata Scott, who this is her final acting credit. She's not dead, she's still alive, just hasn't done anything else since this, so 20-ish years now. And another little funny thing, I keep running into this with this show, we have another person who was in an episode of Star Trek. She played an admiral in the TNG episode Realm of Fear. So, nice to see that. Now, the plot begins with everybody, chilling in Ray's living room. They're trying to get a couple of them to leave. Marie is standing in the doorway, and she's like, guess who died? And she's trying to turn it into a game. And then she finally mentions that this older lady in the neighborhood died. And everybody loved her, because of the pie she used to make. So they're all talking about it, oh no, the pie. They're asking how her husband's holding up. He's doing best it can be thought that he could be doing. And that her viewing is going to be at a funeral home. Now, Marie seems to be mourning this death a little bit more than usual, which is something that they all pick up on, because even though Marie is what she would call a people person, she doesn't take these things as strongly as other things. So for this, it really stands out. Now, as we find out, it's because, as in her own words, this person is who she picked for Frank if she were to go first. Which we all know Marie holds the thing of the man is supposed to go first, which is not 100% accurate, but I'm just going to go from the few married couples I've seen die. In my real life, it has held true. Both my adopted grandfather and my step-grandfather that raised me both went first. And even though they were divorced at the time, my biological paternal grandfather went a lot sooner than my paternal grandmother by a couple decades. Then again, so there's that. So I could see why she would think that. And plus there's a stereotype of men doing more stupid stuff than women, so that kind of plays a little bit into it for humor. Now, Frank, of course, is like, what? Really? Why would I want that? I could do better, which leads to the Harriet Lickman joke that you would expect in this situation. Now, this gets Debra thinking, replacement spouses. If I were to go first, who would I want for Ray? And they're thinking about it. And of course, she brings up one of their best friends. She brings up Linda, of course, played by the actress who almost got the job at Debra, so there's a little in-joke there. And of course, Ray's thinking about it which, of course, like I mentioned, the thing with jealousy, it leads to that. It's like, I'm not even dead yet, you're already fantasizing about having sex with her, about what she would look like naked. And Ray returns the favor by suggesting Bernie, which Debra kind of seems to scoff at a little bit, and they're like, oh, it's because he's fat, isn't it? It could be that, but it could also be that it's like, really? Just because I picked Linda, you went with Bernie and all that? It's a weird thing. It leads to a little bit of a fight, which they do make up the next day. But then Debra's like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do our plans. Bernie was sick with the flu last night. He slept on the bathroom floor, which turns out is her lie, because she cancels their outing using that same excuse for Ray, and they go to the viewing. And of course, we see the usual cast of characters there. We see Robert and Amy there as a couple, talking about everything. Which we find out over the course of this is that she too was on the Ray has to get a little bit more than Robert train. Because even though initially she gave Robert a slightly bigger piece of pie, she always snuck Ray an extra one. Which with that, it's like, I really hate when they would favor siblings and stuff like that. When it's something like that, make it equal. Or if you're going to make one bigger than the other, go by need or whatnot. It's just one of those weird things, like, really, Robert getting the shaft once again, and of course has a little bit more truth to his line. It never ends for Raymond. Everybody loves Raymond. Now, as you would expect, eventually Linda and Bernie show up and the truth about Debra's lie comes out, and then they start talking about their whole replacement spouse thing, which, based on what I've already described about what they were talking about the night before, you can already see where this is going to go. They get into a little bit of an argument, and of course throughout this whole thing, who shows up? Miss Harriet Lickman. And the way it's built up, you see her walk in, you're like, who is this person? I don't know her. And then Robert's like, oh, Mrs. Lickman. And the camera cuts over to Frank and Maria. They're over at the casket, kneeling in front of it, praying and all that. And it's a back shot, and you see Frank slowly turning his head and looking over it with a look on his face. Oh, yeah. And then they get into an argument, like, you were picturing her naked and all that. Big old Frank and Marie argument that you would expect. So you can already tell this wake is going down the tubes, which the husband is there, so you can only imagine what Mr. Caputo, I forget what his first name is all thinking with it, like, oh no, my beloved Rose's wake and they're messing it up. But then Frank inadvertently mentions the whole replacement spouse thing in a way that really brings all the energy crashing down, and that line is, I wouldn't be cut dead with Rose Caputo. It doesn't really take a lot of imagination to see why wording it that way is probably not the best for a wake, because it's like, cut dead, whoa, ooh, poor choice of words, as the Joker once said. And it just goes downhill from there. That's really all I have to say about the episode, because, sorry, this is another one where I watched the episode and wasn't able to get around to recording it until now for various reasons, energy levels and all that, so there's not really much else to comment on it. This time I didn't refresh it. But all in all, it's another fun episode, definitely one I've never skipped, because I've always loved this one ever since I first saw it in syndication, so yep, another one of those ones. And I do like that it continues the wedding theme that we have for these last few episodes before the wedding. And it adds a little interesting concept with the, oh, well, what would you do if your spouse died? Would you move on with another one? Which, if there is an afterlife, would make that confusing if you all ended up in the same place. Or if you're going to go the whole joke route, what Ray says. I would consider myself irreplaceable. But definitely one to show people if you're trying to show them like random episodes. Definitely one not to skip, at least my opinion from this season. Others might feel differently. And of course the next episode, even though wedding and the wedding planning is one of the subplots, the main plot is another random little tiff between Marie and Debra that could happen anytime. It just happens to happen now. And of course I am going to get into another little talk about legal stuff, because it does involve driving under the influence. Or if you want to use another version of it, driving while intoxicated, because Debra gets arrested and all she was doing was sitting behind the wheel with the radio on, and she fell asleep while waiting for Ray. That's right, next time will be the ticket episode, which has another person who was in an episode of Star Trek, and we'll talk about it next time. Till then, guys.